All right, we are back with another episode, and we have some recent events that have happened that have prompted this episode, namely the state tournament.
Yeah, 5A and 6A boys state championship tournament held at the University of Utah.
Yeah.
It was such a good week. It went over a week, obviously, with the first round games, but we had such fun basketball played.
And we personally have relationships with teams like Riverton and Herriman made a deep run. I have kind of an affiliation with Olympus. And so that's why we're kind of focusing on 5A, 6A boys. The women's tournament was also taking place. The lower classes were also taking place, but we really got to watch a lot of these games. I feel like we can more intelligently talk about these games than we could others.
It's such a fun time of year, though. I know both of us spent a lot of time watching these games. You were present for a bunch of the games. Some of our friends were commentating the games. It's just such a fun time of year. There's not another time of year like it if you're into basketball or high school basketball for sure.
Oh, it's great. And I remember as a kid, my dad would take me to state tournament games and we'd go watch all of this happening, and some notable players like Mark Jackson at Olympus, Sean Green at Olympus, Jackson Emery.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like great players coming through the state tournament. And so I wanted to continue that tradition. So for the past 2 years, Jared is an 8 and 9-year-old. I've been going there with my dad and Jared. So we got 3 generations there.
It's so fun.
And then right on the home team's tunnel where they're able to come out and go back into their locker rooms, we get that front row. And Jared, with every home team, he just sticks his hand out there and he starts to become like the best friends of every team, whether we know him or not. They're shaking his hands as they're going in and out of the tunnel. As they're waiting for the next game, he'll sit and talk to him. So he's just in heaven.
Core memories.
This is just such a cool experience for all of us.
That's awesome. No.
So let's jump into it. Should we start with 6A?
Let's do it.
So the quarterfinals is where we start because all of the previous rounds happened at home sites, and then the quarterfinals jumped in at the University of Utah. So we're going to kind of cruise through the quarterfinals a little bit because we want to get to other things that are happening later in the semis and the final. The first game, Corner Canyon, Bingham.
Yeah, they're region rivals, first off. So
third time they're playing each other this year.
They've seen a lot of each other in region play. They split in region play. Is that right? 1-1. And first and foremost, I just want to say, and I'll be brief on this because there was actual talk about this in the broadcast too, but I'm not a huge fan of region, not necessarily rivals, but just region competitors. That's the word I was looking for, playing each other so early in the state tournament.
Yep.
And I wasn't the only one feeling that way, but it just is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But
the whole Region 2 was kind of stacked on one side of the tournament.
They were.
And then Region 1 was stacked on the other side of the tournament. So you had a lot of region play on each side of the bracket.
You know, they've seen each other play in region, and I get it too. They're rivals or competitors, but I mean, I kind of wanted to see different regions match up earlier on in the state tournament, but that's just my
Well, and
whining.
it's interesting because you could say, is one region stronger than the other? So
Right.
Region 1, you kind of had Davis and Layton as the kind of the better teams in that region, finishing, I think they split the region championship. And then in Region 2, you had Herriman as kind of the cream of the crop there with Corner Canyon. And then going down to Region 3, their records, I think 17-8, won the region there with, was it Westlake?
Yep.
And Lone Peak and Lehi. And so there, you would look on paper, it would look like Region 3 is a weaker region. But as we see in some of these games, like they held their own against some of these teams.
Yeah, it might have just been more evenly spread out, you know, competitive-wise.
Yeah. So let's dive into the quarterfinals. Corner Canyon, Bingham. Corner Canyon wins this by 10. It is a closer game than that. So it is a very tight game. And then as we get down to the end, we're dealing with free throws, fouls, and then Corner Canyon pulls away. But very close games throughout the regular season and additionally here. Herriman Lehi was surprising. Herriman is the number 1 ranked seed in the tournament and in 6A.
Yes.
Lehi comes out punching. I mean, they were physical. They were hitting every shot.
I think in this game, Herriman was down by 18 points.
In the third quarter.
Yeah.
Third quarter down by 18, and then Herriman, and I'm watching with Jared, right? And the good teams, if they get punched in the face, I was telling them you got to punch right back. They don't fold up their tents. They don't quit. And they went on a 12-0 run themselves.
I'm sure that was an unfamiliar position or territory that they found themselves in.
Yeah.
Down that much, late in the game, at the state tournament.
Yep. But then they started to match that physicality, and they came back, and Lehi started missing some shots.
Yeah.
But they had a swagger to them that was fun. And what makes that a little bit more dramatic is Lehi beat Herriman in the semifinals last year to make it to the state championship, where Lehi ultimately won it.
Shout out Cooper Lewis.
Yes.
Coach Quincy Lewis.
Next game we have Davis Westlake. Davis is the number 2 seed in the tournament. And what should have been what you would think of as a blowout, similar to the Herriman Lehi.
Yeah.
It was a very close game.
I have to go back a few games with
Yeah.
Davis, and I know we're just starting at the quarterfinals, but because we're doing a tournament recap,
Yeah.
Davis almost got knocked out
Yeah.
early on to a number 15 American Fork team, which
In overtime, if I remember.
I think it was double.
Yeah.
The thing about that game is, and I'm not the only one that thinks it, but American Fork probably wasn't a typical 15 seed.
Mhm.
But regardless, right? They're on paper as the 15 seed, and they took Davis to double OT.
Yeah.
Anyways, Davis came out of that game. In the Westlake game, Westlake was right there late
just
in that
kinda
game.
hung around.
They hung.
Like looking at the two teams, I think Davis appeared to be the bigger,
No
stronger,
question.
faster team.
No question.
But Westlake just kind of hung around. And Coleman Atwater is an incredible player for Davis. I think he led the state in 3 points and scoring for 6A. Incredible player. In this game, it looked like he kind of went a little bit into hero ball, and he was forcing up some shots, and he wasn't hitting them,
Yeah.
which allowed Westlake to stay close.
I didn't anticipate that game to be close,
Yeah.
but at the end of the game, I mean, I can't remember exactly how many minutes left, but I wasn't sure who was going to come out on top.
And I was at that one, and you were watching, and so I was texting you, and because we're basically courtside on that first row, and I was like, Davis looks scary. We gotta watch this team.
Which leads into the next game.
Leads into the next game. Layton, Lone Peak.
Layton Lone Peak.
You watched more of this one.
I'm a little bit more familiar with Lone Peak just because of proximity to where I live and maybe some of their traditions too in basketball. But I had not seen Layton play, and there was commentary about Layton being a scary team in transition. So the game starts, Lone Peak is pressing. That game was over so early into that game. Layton runs away with it, and I'm texting you, Eric, and I'm telling you, Layton is all of a sudden a favorite to win it. They beat Lone Peak in that game 86-55, and when you win like that, that doesn't necessarily mean all your best star players are playing late in that game either, right? I mean, that game was out of hand early on, and Lone Peak didn't have any answer for the aggressiveness.
Well, you sent me that message of like, hey, what are your thoughts after quarterfinal day one?
Yeah.
And I told you Davis scares me, but your pick was Layton coming out of that.
Which we're going to find out who was right and who was wrong.
No. What's also interesting is that Layton has a couple of studs, and one of them specifically Carter Miller. I believe he's a coach's kid. He is also a sophomore, and he takes a lot of responsibility on that team. So he had 27 against Lone Peak.
Unbelievable.
He had 32 in the Syracuse game before that. So big-time scorer, coach's kid, great player.
One of the kids, and I apologize, Eric, I'm not sure, but it was mentioned that he plays a wide receiver at a similar level to how he plays basketball. I don't know if it's him, but one of the players on Layton, same thing. I mean, he's a multi-sport athlete at the highest level for this age. You know, that's pretty incredible.
So now let's get to the semifinals. We have another region rivalry with
Don't love it.
Corner
Don't
Canyon
love
Herriman. And they had split during the regular season.
Also
Herriman won
split.
at home big, and then Corner Canyon won, not huge, I think it was like 10 to 15 points at Corner Canyon. So they meet up again. Very close game all throughout. Again, the score, it's a 9-point victory for Herriman. But Corner Canyon has Noah Bendinger. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I think he's committed to go to Boise State. So smooth. 6'4" guard. He reminds me a little bit of like the Balls, like Lonzo Ball.
Yes.
Just very smooth and nonchalant, but he's good.
We'd also love to have him on the show.
Yeah. He was fun to watch. He got into foul trouble, which was interesting. So he got a couple of fouls, which I think later we'll talk about the referee situation in this tournament. A couple of fouls that I don't know were fouls on him. And then one of the Herriman players who we absolutely love, Stone, kind of baited him into a charge that I think got him his fourth foul. And that changed the dynamic of Corner Canyon's offense.
I didn't anticipate this game to be as close because I know Herriman, as is Corner Canyon, but is very well coached. And I thought that the adjustments would be made from region play. I felt like Herriman had settled into playing in the state tournament right after the Lehi scare. But this game was close, and it was competitive, and Corner Canyon did not back down.
No. And I've been texting you about it. That number 12 for Corner Canyon, long, very skilled on defense, and he just gets blocks, he gets steals, he's just kind of everywhere.
Player.
You can beat him off the drive, and then he recovers, kind of like the Andre Karolinko type of stuff, where you beat him, and then he'd come out of nowhere and block it. So very athletic team, very athletic. that could keep up with Herriman's size, strength, and athleticism.
That was a really good game. Need to shout out Cale Barclay in that game.
He took over.
He took over because I had thought, wow, this is really close. Corner Candy could win this game.
Yeah.
And Cale just put his foot down and said, I don't think so. I'm going to show you who the best player is out here on the floor. And he did everything. He made shots. He rebounded. He played good defense. So really a good effort.
Also in the Lehi game, he had a similar effect in that second half. He had a few possessions in a row where he just took it to the basket, got layups, and he kind of took over that Lehi game late as well.
His size and athleticism as well as his shot, it's just a problem. He's a mismatched nightmare.
I've had to guard him, and he is a beast. He's unbelievable. All right, and then we move to Davis Layton.
I was so excited.
This is our matchup. This is you picking Layton, me picking Davis.
Layton absolutely spanks Lone Peak, and I'm telling Eric here, I think they are the scariest team because it was so effortless the way they did it, and Lone Peak being a good team. I was wrong, and I'm not even too proud to tell you I was wrong. Davis just played a completely different brand of basketball than what Lone Peak had played. They were physical. They were big. They looked like,
and they're fast though, because they were up tempo too. Because Layton's up tempo, Davis. So it was like a tennis match of just seeing the ball go back and forth because they were,
and a number of good scores on Davis too, right? I mean, it was. Anyways, Layton falls in that game, which I didn't anticipate. And Layton and Davis in region play had also split, and neither game was close.
Yeah, and Layton got an early lead in this game, and then Davis just went on this run and tear that they won by 20. And
I think Davis and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they scored 18 unanswered in that game. There was a stretch where it was like Layton looks so strong, and then Davis says, "I don't think so.
Yeah.
We're here, and we're not going away," and they end up winning the game.
And Miller, that number one, who's great for Layton. I got there for the second half, and again, just kind of courtside watching, he looked gassed. Like it looked like he had just taken so much energy, and he was missing a lot of shots short that I think he would regularly make. But that's just a lot to deal with. Davis is so big, so strong, so fast, and very disciplined.
So big at every position.
Yeah, and not like necessarily always tall, but just thick, athletic, very very solid team, which sets up. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the state tournament, though, does that to you because you're playing at, the most physical level you've played all year, and you're playing all these games within a number of days. It's not like a lot of, rest time between games.
And going back to that feeling, like in a regular game, you're already amped up. You've got the adrenaline, but in a state tournament game, everything just pushed up even higher. And so every defensive possession is intense. The crowd's yelling.
Playing at a different venue.
And so I just remember everything being so much more physical, and aggression had to be there or else it was over.
Yeah. It was such a good game.
Which leads us to the title game. And we had, this was interesting, there were 0 upsets in the 6A bracket. So every round, the team that was seeded higher, better, I guess seeded lower in terms of their seed number, won. And so now we've got 1 versus 2.
Bizarre that happened.
Yeah.
We've talked offline that could have been a mental block as much as anything because it's incredible that there's no upsets, right? It's 1 versus 2 in the state championship game.
Yep. And this game, highly anticipated, great game just to watch. 2 very different styles.
Very different.
They're both very physical, very big, very athletic. But Herriman they slow the pace down. They run through their sets, very smart, very deliberate. Davis is a little bit more up-tempo. They'll push the ball, and then they have that dominant scorer in Atwater, and then everybody else kind of filling in as well.
This was such a good game for both teams, for sure. But I'll just tell you, with 4 minutes left in that game, maybe 4.5 minutes, Herriman was definitely looking like the stronger team.
Yep.
I thought that Herriman was going to pull this one out.
And it was close. I think the first quarter, Herriman's up 2. At the end of the half, they're up 4. At the end of the third quarter, I think it was 3. And then at 4.5 minutes left, they're up 3. Carlo Mulford hits a big 3 to put them up 3.
Carlo played phenomenal in this game.
Yep. And then they just go on a drought to where they aren't making buckets. Davis gets a few easy ones, and then
right by the rim.
Yep. And then they just kind of put it away.
Hit some shots, and anyways, next thing you know, it's a 9-point victory for Davis.
And it's so hard. So we've followed Herriman a lot. I know the coach, he's been on here, Doug, is amazing, a very good friend of ours. And Jared absolutely loves Herriman. So the Herriman boys were very nice to Jared, giving him high fives, letting him check out the locker rooms, just all that stuff. So Jared is just devastated when they lose. And so we were having this conversation. He's like, oh, I wish Herriman would have won. And I was like, hey, Davis has little kids that love their players too. And their players are giving high fives to everybody. And in the season of a basketball group and your team, it's either going to end in tears or cheers. And in this case, there's only one team that gets to cheer at the end, and the rest are ending in tears.
There's one team, and I hope that the players of all these teams enjoy the journey, because it's unfortunate. But I mean, one team comes out feeling like everything we set out to accomplish, we did. One team cuts down the nets.
Yep.
Right? I mean, a lot of good effort. A lot of good effort out of every team.
And for those seniors, I mean, I can just kind of empathize there, because the weight of understanding that was your last high school game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it kind of just hits you there at the end, and tears just start coming. Like, I wasn't an emotional person in high school, but for whatever reason, you just can't control it.
No, it's the best time.
Yeah.
It's the best time.
I think that to sum up the 6A tournament, and this will also be for 5A a little bit, the teams that succeeded, what did you notice in the better teams succeeding in this tournament, of what pushed them over the top to win?
Okay, I'm thinking back to the Lehi Herriman game where it looked like Lehi was going to pull off an upset, and all of a sudden the confidence of Herriman started to show. They started to hit some shots. They started to hit more shots. And so certainly confidence, and I saw Davis play with it too the whole tournament, especially in that Layton Davis game. I thought Layton had peaked at the right time, that type of, situation for Layton, and Davis they just believed in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed, so we talk about the Lehi Herriman game, they started making shots. I think that the consistent thing that I saw throughout the tournament was shot selection.
Yeah.
So that 12-0 run, Herriman hits 4 threes, and they were wide open threes.
Yeah.
They weren't contested. I know that Doug works on his team on shot selection, and I noticed that with Davis too. They got a lot of layups, and when Davis struggled was when their shot selection wasn't great. If Atwater was trying to play a little, like, kind of force things up.
Totally trying to force it.
Yeah. But when he wasn't, and when he's kind of going through the development of the game, shot selection is huge. And then the defensive intensity of these teams that are successful in terms of rebounding, physicality, and then making sure that they aren't giving up offensive rebounds was kind of stood out to me with these guys.
Yeah, that Davis team played really smart towards the end of the game when they needed to, but they just too many wide open layups, even, so.
And it seems like every good team has a stud athlete who is able to create their own shot or two.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have very great role players at what they do who have bought into their role, and they're willing to do the dirty work, be the defender, be the rebounder, whatever that may be. I know Herriman has several. I know Davis has several. And it's not that they don't score. It's just they do everything else as well.
They understand that there's, matter of fact, Doug, Coach Meacham talked about this, but hey, somebody on our team shoots with a higher percentage than I do. There doesn't need to be 5-star players, right?
Yeah.
It's the team, at least from the outward view that we have from the state tournament, that the teams that played best together won.
Yeah. Yep.
Should
we transition to 5A?
Let's do it. Some big news in 5A too.
5A had some massive news. So we'll start in the quarterfinals again. And immediately at the quarterfinals, 5A does not follow the pattern of the best seed winning, because we have a massive upset.
Right in the quarterfinals, the number one ranked team in our state, regardless of size of school, 5A, 6A, was Orem High.
Yep. And so they are the number one ranked, obviously, seed in 5A as well. And they drop by 2 points to Brighton. Interestingly enough, the head coach of Orem played at Brighton. So Jace Tavita was a fabulous high school player. He went on to play at the University of Utah, but he gets knocked out of the tournament by his alma mater.
A 9
Bengals.
seed.
A 9 seed.
Which may or may not mean that much, but it wasn't like it was deep in, semifinals or finals, right?
Yeah.
It's a 9 seed in the quarterfinals that take them down.
And Orem had some shots, which is unfortunate. They had some kind of point-blank layups that missed, and even at the very end, I think there's a desperation 3 that gets heaved up there, and then one of Orem's guys is running down the court, and it looks like it was an alley-oop. I don't think it was planned as an alley-oop, but he goes up, and he's right at the rim, and he just kind of miffs the layup, which was unfortunate, and then that meant that was the game. But kind of what we had talked about with the Westlake Davis game, Brighton just kind of hung around.
Yeah, they did. You can't let a team hang around like
Right,
that.
because you never know.
You never know.
Highland beats Bountiful
Yep.
by 21, so they kind of outclass Bountiful, I think, in that regard. Highland was a very high seed, and Bountiful was great as well. Olympus, Springville. So we got to talk here.
Yeah.
Olympus is a favorite of mine. Coach Barnes will be on this podcast here soon, so we'll get his insight into this. Springville had a massive man on their team. Very, very athletic.
Massive man.
But if you were to look at the two teams and line them up, like Olympus has a tall guy, Lazarus, not as massive as this dude in terms of bulk.
Yes.
And so as you're looking at these two teams, you're like, oh, Springville's going to push them around. They're going to get whatever they want. And Olympus takes care of business, winning 70-56.
We'll discuss this later, I'm sure, but Olympus is gritty. I mean,
So
they are
gritty.
so gritty, right?
Yep.
This was actually my first time to watch Olympus play this year, and they did not disappoint.
Yeah.
They laid their claim to the number 2 seed for sure.
Some great players at Olympus that we will get into. And then the last game in the quarterfinals is number 3 Timpview against number 6 Alta. And Alta they were runner-up last year to Olympus. They lost a couple of their players, but they have a riser on their team who you may recognize the name Riser. He's a cousin of Isaiah Riser at Copper Hills. But Riser is shorter, and Timpview's length really bothered Alta in general, but especially Mr. Riser. So Timpview's starting lineup, I think as they announced it was 6'9", 6'8", 6'6", 6'5", 6'3". So that's the starting lineup for Timpview. Very tall,
big boys.
long, athletic squad from Timpview, and it definitely showed here. And it was a close game. Alta hung around,
Yeah,
but
they did.
a 10-point win for Timpview.
Just as a side note, do you happen to know what grade that riser's in? Because Carlo Mulford, also a cousin to Isaiah.
I think they're all juniors.
Wow. It's a good bloodline for Utah basketball.
Dash Riser is a junior.
Wow. Jumping into the semifinals game, we have Highland and we have Brighton, who's just run off this massive upset, taking down the number 1 seeded team. And I don't know if emotions, were something that had kind of settled in with Brighton, but they fell heavily to Highland. They lost by quite a few.
And they stuck around for a bit, but there were a lot of missed layups. And again, I don't know if that's the legs are just gone after highly emotional. They upset Juan Diego too. That was a 9-8.
Right. That's
it's technically an upset. So they've kind of played this like bracket buster throughout this tournament. And then it looked like they just ran out of gas a little bit. And they had some athletes, but it didn't look like they had people that could consistently create good shots for them.
Yeah.
Next, we have Olympus Timpview, and this was one of my favorite games of the tournament.
Are we telling any side stories to this game?
So Timpview has Dean Ruckert. He's one of the most highly recruited players. He's a junior out of Timpview, 6'8", very athletic, very long. He can shoot the three. He can score mid-range. He can dunk on you.
Yeah.
Very skilled player. They have several great players on Timpview, as we just mentioned. Very long team as you're looking across.
Very big. Yep.
And even their subs are not short guys. I mean, their guards coming in are still 6'3", 6'4". Olympus has Gavin Lowe. He is listed at 6 feet tall. No
Probably
shade
isn't.
on Gavin.
Right.
I don't know that he's 6 feet tall. Maybe with shoes on, he's 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And he's got such amazing swagger. Like, if he saw me in the street, he might beat me up for saying this. But
we love him.
We absolutely love him.
We'd
and
love to have you on the show, Gavin.
the reason I bring it up is from the tip. He says, I've got Dean Ruckert. He's giving up 8 inches on paper, 9 inches at least in real life to Dean Ruckert. And he guards him the entire game. And he takes Dean out of the game. Now, Dean finishes with 14 points. He has a couple of dunks, one at the end to get some points in there. But it looked like Dean didn't want any part of Gavin. And Gavin is small, he's quick, he's strong, and Gavin dominated that game.
We didn't hate his swagger at all.
It was funny because Dean would go for a drive, Gavin would get in front of it, and he's talking to Dean the entire time. He's talking to the Timpview cheerleaders. He's talking to his crowd. I mean, Gavin has this swagger about him, but he backs it up.
Yeah.
I mean, he is at a certain point, Timpview is triple teaming Gavin to get the ball out of his hands.
Incredible.
And Olympus is too disciplined, and they've always been a good shooting team to where they were just getting wide open shots. And they beat Timpview by 18, but it felt like more. I mean, they were amazing.
The end of that game tended to drag on a little bit.
Yeah, the end of that game, and look, everybody has their own styles. It's a 20-point game. The Timpview coach calls, I think, 2 timeouts in the last minute and 30 seconds, doesn't put in the sophomores or juniors, extends the game. The Olympus fans are yelling at the Timpview coach. The Timpview coach is interacting with the fans. So The reason that matters for me is that Jared was there. That was a 9 p.m. start, so we don't get home till like 11:30 or midnight with my 9-year-old, which is bad parenting, I guess. But
there may or may not have been a text message sent from me to Eric, the other Eric here on the show with us.
Yeah,
post 11 p.m.
My wife didn't know where we were, so we were walking to our car, and there's kind of a trek and a busy parking lot, so I didn't feel her call, and that walk was probably about 10 to 15 minutes, so she'd called me a few times. I get in my car, I noticed I had some missed calls, I noticed a text message from you, and she thought we had died.
Anyways, that's just a scary text to get late. But my point there is a high school game to end at, let's just call it really close to 11 or... because I know time getting out of the arena and everything, but that was a late game for high school sports.
And what's interesting is that the quarterfinal was the day before. So they played quarterfinal, next day semifinal, then they get a day's rest. 6A, they played quarterfinals, had a day rest, and then did semifinal finals. So a lot of games in a short amount of time for these kids.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the final.
A little bit anticlimactic for me, this final, but a huge shout out to Olympus, right? Olympus, we know, is this basketball mecca. Really built a nice program there. A few years ago, the president of the Utah Jazz, Dennis Lindsay, his son plays there. Just some really good players have gone through Olympus. My mom's former alma mater, Olympus High. Really a good, scrappy, gritty team. And Eric, I'll let you fill out how this game went.
Well, Gavin maintains his swagger. He has 35 points in this game.
Incredible.
He just takes over. But he gets a lot of attention. But Gavin, I don't think, can do what Gavin does without everybody else on that team. They are you said gritty. They out-rebound teams that they shouldn't out-rebound.
That they're much shorter than.
Their defensive aggression is unbelievable. Offensively, it's good, better, best shot, right?
Yeah.
Let's get the best shot. And Gavin's going to create, and he's going to get his own, but everybody's ready to take that shot and make it. And so they've got players like Caden Jackson, who's a junior, unbelievable player. Like offensively, he can take it. And that was the other thing when we first saw him is they penetrate so well. They're just getting to the basket and getting layups, and then they'll kick out for a three. And so a lot of Olympus's kind of reputation is that they're this run and gun 3-point shooting team. This team, they can make the threes, but they penetrate so hard and get so many layups.
As I was watching that game, there was no doubt to me that Olympus knew before that game they were going to win.
Yeah.
You know,
and
whatever
I think
it took.
they'd split in the regular season. We got region rivalries here. I think they had split in very close games, but this one was not close.
They just had a confidence about them. And anyways, I appreciated it. They looked really, really good in that game.
Couple shout outs to Jack Evans. So I know his dad, Casey Evans, who was a stud basketball player in and of himself. He went on to play football for the University of Utah. And Jack plays an important role there, just kind of that football player, get a bunch of hustle points, rebounds, all of that. Ty Goldberry, I really liked his game. Again, he rebounded like a dog, and he's not a big dude.
We respect that player if you couldn't tell.
For sure. Davian Lazarus, he's their big guy. He's just a sophomore, but he knocked down some big threes in the Timpview game. Very good shooter for his size and just a great player. Luke Owen, I really liked watching Luke Owen play. He was number 14. He's about 6. They have him listed at 6'4", but if any time Lazarus was out of the game because of foul trouble or anything else, Luke was taking on the other team's biggest players. And so you look at like the Timpview game, he's taking on guys that are well taller than him, 5 inches taller than him, and he just is a beast. So much fun. They've got several great players that are super fun to watch, but love Olympus. Kind of wanted them to win this anyway because we knew Matt would come on here, Coach Barnes, and talk with us. But since Jared's 9 years old, when I was 9 years old, I was going to Olympus games. That's where my dad went. And so I have a special place in my heart for Olympus.
I also have a special place in my heart because I wanted to let you know my son, who needs to grow to play at this level, he's on the Lazarus diet or the Cale Barclay diet. So I just shout out to those guys, those big boys, man. They, it's incredible to see that talent, that athleticism, and that height at the high school level.
Yeah. And so Coleman Atwater wins 6A MVP, tournament
Incredible
MVP.
Player. Yeah.
No surprise there. And then Gavin Lowe wins it for 5A, which he goes on a tear in this tournament, which is impressive to watch. And these are all online now. KSL Sports broadcasts these. So if you want to go watch some of these players play, they're all unbelievable. Even the teams that are losing, they've got these players that are absolutely fantastic. So it's such a great week to spend up at the state tournament and watching these people play.
It was so great. And I just want to say one thing, too, that's different from basketball to other team sports. Basketball is the ultimate team sport, right? I mean, the teams that win are the teams that are the most meshed and have star players, no doubt. But, even like you look at baseball and the entire team's out on the field, but you're going to take an individual at bat or, have an individual time where it's just you up there. Basketball, though, is such a team sport. So shout out to all these teams that played great at the state tournament.
And consistent on the 5A shot selection was important. Aggression was important.
No doubt.
Defense and rebounds. Now can we transition into something that might be a little controversial?
I love controversial.
Can we talk about the officiating?
Oh, my goodness. I wish I knew which game it was. Mid-game, you're at the game. I'm watching the broadcast. And are we getting any officials on our show?
I would love to get officials on this show because we need to preface this with officiating is so difficult. It is so hard. You could probably call a foul on every possession.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, teams are taught to be physical, right? I mean, we know that. Hey, play physical, and how physical is too physical. It was mentioned on the broadcast, but there was one game that I texted you. You're there in person, and I just said, it really feels to me like the officials want to insert themselves into the outcome of this game.
Yeah.
Hated it.
Yeah. There were some of the most obscure calls that I didn't see. I've got my dad there who's 71 years old. He knows basketball as well as anybody, and he's just confused what's going on. Jared, a 9-year-old, doesn't know what's going on. And the consistency, and I think it was mentioned on the broadcast, all we're asking for is consistency.
Right.
Because there would be games where it looks like it's a football match. I mean, they are not calling anything for a certain number of possessions, and then they'll call the most ticky-tack foul out of nowhere, or they'll call these charges that are not charges. Like, it seems like they love the charge call. And so it's just really hard. I think there were a lot of teams there. That's all part of it, though. Doug mentioned that sometimes you have to win a game by 15 to win by 2.
That was such a good comment.
Because everybody has to deal with it. And it seems like if some teams come out super aggressive and the referees let that aggression play out, then that changes things for a team that might be a little bit more, I don't know, there might be a more finesse. And then if they can't respond to that, you can have upsets. You can have different things happen.
It didn't always work, right? This is high school sports, so we're not asking for the professionalism you would get at the NBA level or NCAA level. But at times they had a replay on the broadcast. And I have to tell you, I'm always so surprised at how good, usually, NBA referees are, Major League Baseball umpires are. I kid you not, even as they go to like more of the robot system to make correct calls. I mean, they are incredible. They'll do like ultra slow-mo, and they're usually right.
Yeah.
Or they have a system now where they can at least reverse the call. But it was interesting in the high school tournament when they did some of the replay, the high school referee is not as good as the professional referee, not even close.
Yeah, but again, like you have to go through all kinds of training. You have to go through experience in games to be at that level to referee the state tournament.
You're right.
I think every region is providing referees.
And they're not having just anyone referee those games either.
Right.
You have to be a pretty well-respected referee to ref in the state tournament.
And that's Coach Meacham says it the same way, right? Of there's never been a game where we've been perfect, where we haven't had turnovers, we haven't had missed shots. And I think similar thing with referees, like perfection isn't expected. I guess players and fans and coaches expect perfection on the referee side, but in reality, they're going to miss calls. It just felt like there was some inconsistencies throughout the games that we watched. I
hope, and I think I'm right in saying this, they want to call a really good game and not be remembered as part of the game.
Yeah.
I hope.
Some actions the behavior might show otherwise. But that's an interesting thing too that I say all the time. Stephen Covey says we judge others on their behavior and we judge ourselves on our intention. And so we look at the behavior and we project intention on people when we don't know their intention, whereas we judge ourselves if we can do something pretty silly, but like we can justify our way out of it. So I think same thing here.
Said.
I think their intention is they want to call the best game. I don't think they're trying to favor any team over the other. It just seems like the dynamics of it all. And I'm sure that they deal with the stress of the pressure, the adrenaline, the crowds, everything the same way that any human would. But we'll have to get one of them on here and see what they have to say.
I will be so nice when they're on here because I realize too how difficult it is to call a game and to officiate a game, and it's loud in there and the bands are playing, and it's just, I mean, honestly, it's organized chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And all the coaches will tell you we didn't lose the game because of the referees and the officiating. But take Corner Canyon as an example. When Noah gets in serious foul trouble on a couple of questionable calls and he's their stud offensive player, that changes the dynamic of that team
100%
and
it does.
the game. And so they can make differences in outcomes based off of those calls. But all in all, amazing experience with the state tournament. Super happy about it. I'm already upset that it's not still going on and I have to wait a year for it to start again.
Just to all the athletes we watched compete. And we aren't giving the girls tournament a lot of love, which we apologize. We'll grow and do the same because they had a great tournament going on as well. But to all the athletes that we watched, it was amazing. And you did such a great job. You represented your schools well. You competed hard and made it fun as spectators for us to watch a great tournament.
Okay, we need to do a secret code word at the end of, they made it this far. What word should they throw in the comments to prove that they have made it here?
Yeah. I fell asleep halfway back through the show. So, no, I think that it needs to be Olympus.
Ooh.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Shout out to Olympus High.
Olympus High. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in this far, and we'll see you in the next one.